So go back to January 2001. I'm a consultant for a computer software company in Houston. My love for business, my love for languages, for different cultures had provided me a job in the international department of this company. And things were going good.
Are we going to go back that far, like way into the archives?
All the way back, all the way back.
Then in 2001, I was in my first year of graduate school. And you guys were like in preschool or in kindergarten. And I hadn't met you yet. And I had no intention of working internationally.
Yeah, but I was primed for international business, but not for ministry. I was not from a family that was in any way missions-minded. And I heard this morning the passionate call to find your calling. And I remember sitting in business law class my senior year at ACU in a Mainmaster with a professor saying, you got to know what you're calling. And from my background and where I was from, the thought of trying to find your calling, it didn't even make sense to me. I'd not come from a place that would even allow me to understand what that meant. And maybe some of you guys are like that today, wondering, what does that really mean to have a calling? My calling, I was going to be rich. That was what my calling was, I thought. I didn't go on a mission trip until my senior year in college, 1999. That trip transformed me. That trip was probably at that point the single most impactful thing in my life. And I could feel after that trip that things would never be the same.
Go on, don't let me stop you.
Well, before that trip, my God, my Jesus, my church, they fit in a really nice little white box. It had a white lid on it and a red ribbon wrapped around it for bow. And on that trip, the Holy Spirit, who, by the way, was not in my box because I didn't have a clue what that was. On that trip, the Holy Spirit grabbed the ends of that ribbon and pulled very gently. The ribbon fell off. The Holy Spirit took the lid off. And very violently, the Holy Spirit dumped my God, my Jesus, and my church out of that box. And they would never go back into a box again.
And I didn't have a box. I came from a family very familiar with ministry and missions. My grandparents were career missionaries in China and Taiwan, and so my dad grew up overseas. So I heard a lot of stories, and my dad still feels more at home over there than here in the U.S. But when he graduated from high school, from Taipei American School, his parents bought him a one-way ticket to Abilene, and he came to ACU, go Wildcats.
Side note, when you feel more like you're Taiwanese than American and your parents put you on a flight to the U.S., that's not a good thing.
No, but he finally, after struggling, he sorted things out. And of all things, he had sworn he would be a missionary or a preacher, and then he did become a preacher. And so I'm a preacher's kid, a missionary grandkid, just really got that double dose of ministry and missions and serving. Seeing a lot of that firsthand growing up. You know, that's the good, the bad, the ugly, the creepy, the slimy, the really dark stuff. But
Yes, so my background was a little bit different. I was saturated by my father with a solid business ethic growing up. He came from humble circumstances, and he worked his way to the top of a major automotive parts manufacturer with worldwide manufacturing, worldwide distribution, and worldwide sales. And he realized early on that the ability to speak another language opened many doors and provided many opportunity in international business.
So I'm just seeing you with a face with like dollar signs in his eyes. Would that be right?
That's correct.
Oh.
Yeah, I was one of the lucky kids. I had a father who wrote the check for me to go to college, and I got my education financed to go to school all over the world until I'd be fluent in Spanish. And while I did work my way through college, it was because I just loved working, not because I had to. I started my education career at the University of Tennessee. From there, I transferred to University of Madrid, La Universidad Complutense de Madrid. From there, I came back to the U.S. and found myself at Abilene Christian. And I loved what I was learning. I loved the professors. I loved the godly men and women that were investing in us. That's why I love being part of this. But the language wasn't there yet. I still couldn't speak Spanish after all these years of studying Spanish. So I found a program at the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina, and I signed up with a full load. And it was commerce markets, anthropology, political science. It was sink or swim. And after about 2 weeks of really treading water, finally the language clicked, and I was able to speak Spanish. I finally ended up back in Abilene, where upon graduation, I had one goal. That was to amass wealth as much as I could and as fast as I could do it.
Yeah, well, I was wired a little bit different, and we still hadn't met yet, which is good because we would not have liked each other very much. But kind of like you, I didn't go on missions trips in high school, but I was kind of inundated with that environment. But in college, I did decide, hey, I ought to go some places and see some things. And because I was already really familiar with Asia, I went to trips in Latin America, Africa, and Eastern Europe, just to kind of see what was out there and kind of decide whether that was for me or not. But I didn't really have a great idea about what my vision was or what I wanted to do. I just kind of had a vague sense that I didn't want to live all about myself. I wanted to help other people. A very vague inclination. At one point, I seriously wanted to quit college and like go to Romania and rock babies that needed, I don't know, love and attention. But I realized that if I did that, I really wasn't bringing a skill set, and so that I should have sort of the discipline to finish college and then really make a plan. So I decided that I wanted to become a doctor, and by the time I was ready to graduate, I kind of realized that I didn't want to become a doctor because they spend very little time with patients sometimes, and so I realized kind of reluctantly that I thought what I wanted to do was become a nurse. So I enrolled in a graduate nursing program at Vanderbilt.
So while she was becoming smarter, I was on my way to achieve my goals. I knew that being this consultant gig, I knew it wasn't where I was going to be for a long time. It was more of a stepping stone. And I was traveling all over. I was staying in great places, eating a lot of great food. And since I wasn't a consultant with a large accounting firm, I actually wasn't locked in an office somewhere in a closet. I was actually keeping regular hours. And, you know, life on the outside was pretty good. But inside, this job, this life that I dreamed of having, I was just miserable. Between 1999 and 2001, I had taken 4 or 5 trips back down to Honduras. When, for me, Honduras was my only point of reference for mission trips. It's the first place I went, it's what I knew, and it's what I stuck with. And it was on the last trip that I had taken in 2000. I took a few extra days off from work when I realized that for the first time in my life, at 23 years old, what my calling was. You know, Allie asked me last week, just in passing, when was the first, she was really curious. When was the first time that you remember the Holy Spirit, like, giving you a spiritual directive to do something? And I could tell by the look in her eyes, she had some really awesome illustration from when, like, she was like 6 months old and God told her to do something. And mine was when I was 23. And I felt for the first time, God, yes. I had made myself vulnerable enough. I had let down my guard enough that I could actually hear him. I know he'd been calling me for many, many years. But I finally could hear him calling me. And so for the first time in my life, I saw I could use my business skills, this entrepreneurial drive, this strong work ethic. I saw I could use that to impact the kingdom directly. And like most entrepreneurs, I don't lie awake at night with a million ideas of the latest gadget I want to invent or the latest technology. I lay awake at night with a million ideas about how I'm going to improve what's already going on, or how I can do it better or more efficiently, or how I can make more money at doing it. And that's what I saw with mission work on the trips that I'd been a part of. It was just inefficient and It didn't seem to steward well the money to get there, much less the time of the people who came to serve. I thought we could do it better, and we could be more effective. We can reach more people. And that's what caught my eye. I could make a real impact. And independently of each other, God was working on Allie and I both for something much bigger than what we knew of at the time. Now, as the entrepreneur in this marriage, I am definitely the gas pedal.
And like by default, I'm the brake
Default.
pedal.
No default to it.
I'm
By
like-
God's amazing crafting, you are the brake pedal.
I'm like, no, what are you doing? We can't do that. Pedal.
This is true. This is true. I could relate strongly to the friendly bantering between Rick and his colleagues this morning.
Tim, I feel ya.
Those are areas that I'm not gifted in, to slow down, to look at everything and process it all. My wife is the missing piece that most entrepreneurs really absolutely need in order to be successful.
That means boring guy. I'm like the one who likes the processes and the strategies and implementing the systems, creating the systems. That's me.
That is my wife. And you know, as an entrepreneur, we always have these lofty ideas. We need someone to reel us back in, to help us analyze the pros. And yes, look at the cons, which is the part I just don't like to focus on. And then develop a strategic roadmap to actually get there. In 2001, I didn't know that I needed one of those. But fortunately, God did know that.
Yeah. It's like a vitamin. I'm a vitamin gas brake pedal.
Yeah, my dad's much more of the strategic planner type. He's a roadmap guy. He's not an entrepreneur. He's a CFO. He's an accounting and finance guy. Some of you guys are in here. There's a place for everything and everything in its place. He's cautious and calculated. I wouldn't doubt that he still has the first dollar he ever made from a bicycle route in 1960 tucked away somewhere. Now, granted, he is very generous and has been an incredible inspiration to me in our journey, but he wasn't always on board. Remember, this is the man who financed my studies around the globe. And so when I called my father to tell him that I was going to quit my dream job in Houston and move to Honduras, he replied very matter-of-factly, "Jarrod, there's enough poor people in Honduras. They don't need one more." Fortunately, he got on board and was one of our founding board members when we incorporated Mission Lazarus. But you know, like most entrepreneurs, when someone tells me no, I just become more emboldened, more committed that I'm going to find a way. We're going to do this. And so I did. And that may or may not be good, but fortunately for us, it's worked out.
Okay, so let's fast forward. And Jarrod moves to Honduras for just a one-year commitment, and then he was going to get back to the real world, back to making money. But he got distracted. He kind of got pulled into seeing all of these opportunities, and really just, it's almost an addiction when you're an entrepreneur to like see a problem and not attack it, right? Some of y'all are wired that way. So he stayed longer. And that turned into sort of it hasn't ended. So that's where we are and what we do. But he was very unconventional. Because when you think of like a missionary, you think of somebody with Bibles in their, in their truck, or in like Bible tracts in all their pockets, and like stopping people.
I always carried a Bible in my truck.
And asking them if they know Jesus. And that's not at all what he did. So he's more like experiential, like Jennifer, likes to be out there, likes to be busy and feel productive. He was making friends with farmers. He knows about farming and ranching, so he's able to relate to a population of people that would not assume that they would have anything in common with this educated white guy living in their country. He made friends with some of the wealthy elite in the community, because that's a networking opportunity that opens doors. Just a lot of unconventional.
But there was naysayers too.
Well, You mean like the other missionaries
The other
who were like,
missionaries.
he doesn't have any business being down here. He doesn't even have a missions degree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, they were right. I didn't have any missions training. I had business training. But you know what? I love people and I love Jesus. And I wanted the people that I loved to also know the Jesus that I love. And to this day, you know, I don't know many scriptures memorized. I get the stories mixed up. If it weren't for a great Bible app, I'd have trouble putting together a Bible study or a sermon. But what I discovered is if our goal is relational rather than based on a conversion, then the Holy Spirit has the opportunity to do the converting. And if we don't hide our faith and living out our lives in whatever industry we find ourselves, and if at the same time we don't alienate others around us because of our faith, then we have the opportunity to come alongside some people who are really hurting and who are completely lost and share the good news more effectively, I think, than if we had perhaps other training.
Sure. One of the most crucial things to get right in international business or international missions is to build relationships, to find the right people and to create authentic connections. Jarrod was blessed in his first year of living in Honduras to have befriended a local pastor and his wife, Juan, who came to Christ in prison. And so he was not conventionally
He wasn't conventional
minister
like me.
type either. But he knew two things really well. He knew the Bible really, really well, and he also knew how to relate to poor people. So Juan and Jarrod were like this awesome duo that went out and did all these things. They spent 10, 12, sometimes 14 hours a day together. They just go out, and Jarrod learned a lot about how to relate with a rural, not formally educated group of people.
Yeah, a lot about what to do, how to reach people. And unfortunately, learned a lot about what not to do from Juan. My two-man road show through the jungle of southern Honduras and the mountains, these remote places that were hard to get to, was going well until July of 2002 when I hosted a medical team from the U.S. And in that group was a beautiful, quiet, and caring young nurse practitioner named Allison Brown. And I knew right away that she was out of my league. I know how far I can kick, and those goalposts were way too far down the field. We hardly spoke that week while she was there.
Except when you picked on me for my Spanish.
This is true.
You were
This is
kinda
true.
harsh.
Yeah, I probably
Like
was.
way harsh.
Yeah. Yeah, but God had other plans. You're Espanol?
Yeah.
God had other plans. After that trip that Allie made to Honduras, we began a whirlwind 6-week email courtship before the days of Skype, before iPhones, texting, all this technology that makes communication easy. And on Labor Day weekend of 2002, 6 weeks after meeting her, we got engaged. And in February of 2003, just 6 months after meeting her, we were married. That'll be 15 years ago next month.
It's true. But just as a side note, we do not really recommend that. Soul or Levi or any of you guys, it's much better when you know the person that you marry. That makes it a lot easier in the first
I thought it worked
years.
out great, babe.
I know. I know you did. It's so sweet. I think we got through some of those things really early on, where it made our commitment to each other stronger than ever. It's really great when you humiliate yourself completely in front of your spouse when you're like, why did I marry you? And he's like, I don't know, why did I marry you? But
we had great people. Rick would come down to Honduras and visit, and he would always pull me aside and be like, so Jarrod, how's everything going in your marriage and everything? And those are really great things. Those are awkward questions to ask people kept holding accountable. But right before we got up, Allie's like, so why don't you be over there and I'll be over here, and then we'll come together kind of pull it off. I said, no, if we do that, Rick's going to think something's up and want to come have a counseling session. Let's be together over on one side.
Rick, our marriage is stronger than ever. Our love for each other, our commitment is stronger than it has ever been. Because we work at it.
Yeah, and there's been a whole lot of grace, in particular in my direction.
Yeah. Go on if you want.
That's okay. You know, what attracted me to Allie, well, was the obvious. She's beautiful, but beyond that, she truly cares about others. It's in her DNA. It's not about her. It never will be and never has been. And I don't want it to be about me. But somehow I always find a way to make it about me. And, you know, thankfully God and Allie have been very patient with this young man.
So I mentioned that my dad kind of had problems when he finally came to the U.S. and adapting. He had sworn he was never going to be in ministry, and then he became a preacher. And then so I should have known better than to swear off ministers, youth pastors, missionaries, etc., just knowing that it would be like this self-fulfilling thing. So I wasn't interested in Jarrod because he was a missionary. That made him off limits to me. But like, I had to kind of break my rule.
But there was this, right?
I had to break my rule because he was very different. And just in a nutshell, if I was going to use just one word, where I would like to use several. Here in my notes, I have several beautiful things written about you here, sweetie.
I don't see those.
They're not in your version, they're in my version. I didn't want you to get a big head. But what I would say, the first quality that jumped out at me about Jarrod is his integrity. And so I would say that can look like many things, but it was very, very easy to see that this is a man who has convictions and values and acts on those in ways that are not just obvious to him, but are obvious to other people, and that other people are benefit from that integrity. And that's just like so attractive to me.
Glad there was something, because with this mug, you know. Allie had insights into ministry that I did not. Her grandparents have poured their lives into missions in China. They translated, I think, probably hundreds of hymns, your grandmother, to Mandarin. They've written books in Chinese. Thousands have come to Christ because of the legacy that they built in Taiwan and mainland China. However, the traditional mission strategy that they used, you know, the strategy that the U.S. church has had for so many years to go and do church, does little to invest in the spiritual and leadership development of the people in the country you're there to serve with. It doesn't nurture independence amongst the indigenous folks to be able to carry the church forward after you leave. And regretfully, after over half a century in China, her grandparents are now back in the U.S. as of about 5 years ago. The indigenous leadership is not strong. And while they reached many people, the impact was probably stunted of what it could have been.
Yeah, sometimes I'm sad about that for them, to have invested their entire lives and then feel like their return, their ROI is less than what it could have been had some different strategies been employed. But you do what you know to do. And at the same time, I will say that I think that because of their experiences and my father's upbringing, that I do have insights that then we made use of and applied to the way that we decided we wanted to attack our own ministry. And so in a way, I think that whenever you can learn from mistakes, they can be your own, or they might be your mentors or your own families. That's a way that those mistakes get redeemed, because the mistakes that they made were to my profit, to my benefit, to ours.
To the ministries as a whole. You know, now as Allie and a medical professional in ministry, she's probably able to do the hardest thing. She has a gift to be able to do what's so hard for so many in ministry, in particular when you're a medical professional, when you have skills that can, quite frankly, heal people. And that's to be able to engage your patients with accountability and tough love. You know, we recognize that we have unlimited need and we have very limited resources to tackle those needs. And it wasn't long before Allie realized that for us to be successful in empowering the people we serve so that they could determine their own outcomes, their own futures, that we could not follow a traditional model of charity that oftentimes creates dependency.
Yeah, so just in looking at these 5 models, or these 5, I guess, tenets of leadership, I really, that we would have benefited from knowing those 5 things so concretely. We, I think, have sort of stumbled at different points in our journey, kind of like figuring these things out. So this is not like theory. This I can say is true, and if you can start from this place, so much the better. Because what we do want to do is we want to empower other people. We don't want to leave them worse off than they were before we came along. But basically what we needed to do, because we didn't have the benefit of a leadership summit and these principles and great mentors, is we kind of had to figure out what was our paradigm going to be. Did we want to be a charity? Did we want to focus on development? Did we want to try to hybridize that concept? So we had to figure those things out first so that we would have something objective that we could use to kind of evaluate our own big ideas. Like Rick has said, not all ideas are great. And so unless you know what your values are, unless you know what your goals are, all of your ideas might look good to you. So I think having a lot of those things in place is sort of a way of having like an auto correction or an auto accountability built in. So whether that's your own personal value system or whether you're leading a company or leading a team, that those are really important. And we realized that really, really early on. But what we couldn't, what we had to figure out is, well, what did we want to do? Did we want to do what everybody does, or are we going to challenge the process? And so we really wanted to do what would create a greater impact. Because if you really think about the power of one, there is great power in one, but you're also limited. You're limited to 80 or 90 years of a life, and then you're going to die. And so is what you're doing and investing in, is there any way that you can make it immortal? Is there any way that you can make it live beyond your own lifetime? And that was sort of like the lofty sort of goal that we were trying to challenge. Well, these processes we put in place, are they things that could be sustainable? Are they things that would live on beyond our own lifetime?
Let me interject. You know, I very sincere and open with you guys. Quite frankly, I didn't give up fame and fortune to go to Honduras to feed people for 80 years and then me die and that be it, and there not be any residual. We wanted to make sure that this was going to outlive us for a long time.
Yeah, so just as a basic example, you know, you've got starving people in the world, and like the solution is like, well, starving people need food. And so then you think, okay, well, so ideas, what are we going to do? And so we really needed to know who we were, what we were about, so that we could decide whether or not we wanted to set up a feeding program and ask donors to fund it for perpetuity, or did we want to try to figure out how can you help starving people make money so that then they can take care of their needs, their own needs and those of their family. And so which one of those did we want to be about? So pretty quickly we determined that we really wanted to be about that longer lasting change, that longer lasting impact. So we are primarily a development organization that is Christian. And we do charity or humanitarian aid only in really extreme circumstances, like after large-scale disaster and things like that, just because that was more in line with our value of what we were trying to accomplish. So like our two mottos that we like to tell people, we couldn't just stick with one, we liked two. So the one that I chose was first, do no harm. And then the one that really resonates with Jarrod is teach a man to fish.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when the first time Allie had to walk someone through this from a group that had been out serving in one of the remote villages, really close to where one of our very remote clinics is located.
You want me to tell them about that?
Yeah, tactfully.
They're going to think I'm awful.
So they can challenge us
Okay.
on it afterwards. They had a
Okay.
class today about being able to accept
Okay,
different
I'm going to
ideas.
come closer in a hope that this is going to make me more endearing to you guys, right? And I'm going to smile a big smile so that y'all will know that I'm not awful and mean, because I often feel like the meanest person in our ministry. But so at the end of a day when we had a mission team with us, I don't know what they were doing that day. They were working in a village near one of our own clinics. And so at the end of the day, everybody's smelly and dirty and tired, and it's not a really great time to approach me. But this woman didn't know that, and so she did. And so she said, Allie, do you know Juana? Do you know her? She has a baby, and she's really sick, and if we don't get her some medicine, she's going to die. And so the woman was a nurse. She was probably right, like in her assessment, that this was pretty serious. And so I don't think she was expecting me to say, well, I know a lot of Juanas, and we work with like dozens of communities, so I don't know if you could be a little more specific, but I'm wondering why Juana hasn't already taken her baby to the clinic, because our clinic is really nearby. Everybody knows that the clinic is there. Everybody knows that we always have medicine. Everybody knows that we will accept anything for payment. If you don't have money, we will take a chicken. We will take firewood. We will take anything so that they can have their, they can pay for their services. And I just am really confused about why a woman would not go ahead and do that. So maybe tomorrow you want to tell her she should go to our clinic.
Yeah, the reality was we recognized that for our ministry, sustainability is a big word. It's not only financial, but it also means in people owning their outcomes. And for us to be successful, we couldn't care more for Juana's child's health than Juana cared for her child's health. And that really, I think, verbalizing that for the first time to someone from a group that had come to work with us was a really defining moment, and it helped us recognize where we were at.
I probably sounded a little harsh. I was younger then. I had less experience. I was less diplomatic. Totally introverted, which I still am. And so I may not have been as gentle with her as I needed to be to help her understand that I wasn't trying to say I didn't care about the baby and the situation. But what I was trying to help her see is that she perceived that the problem was the baby's illness. But I don't think the baby's illness was really the problem. The problem that was there was that the mother had a perceived sense of helplessness. And even though our clinic was available to her, even though she had means at her disposal, her own past lived experiences told her she was helpless, and she didn't feel like she had the power to act. And so that is not something that can be undone in a single day or week or month or year. These are not just academic, like intellectual, in your head beliefs. These are also spiritual beliefs of helplessness or of an inability to act on your own behalf for your own well-being. So really, I felt like what was at stake was her being able to learn how to overcome that. And so the advice to return to Juana in X Village the next day to encourage her to take her baby to the clinic was just one way to chip at that belief. Those belief systems are really, really strong. And of course, babies get sick not just once in their lifetime, but babies get sick a lot. And so if this was going to happen again, and we didn't happen to have a group there, and Juana didn't happen to see some white person that they thought would bring her medicine, then what would Juana do next time? And so it was fundamentally important in our value system of what we're trying, how we're trying to be in relationship with people is not just to make a connection and love on them and give away something that they need right now, but help them to develop skills and a different mindset that will be more functional for them in the long run. And so I'm really not a meanie.
Most of the time. No, Allie's commitment to excellence and to live out this vision has really been a driving force behind everything that Mission Lazarus has done. By 2006, we'd gained a pretty good grip on what didn't work. We knew some things that didn't work. We already had some early fails and some mistakes. And we were figuring out some things that did work. Some of those things, as the years progressed, we also realized that they didn't work. We'd weathered significant storms by that time, including the very public moral failure of my mentor, Juan, and the advocating for the legal rights of a 14-year-old girl who was raped by an American expat missionary who was in Honduras. These scandals were scary, but these events tested us in our convictions and increased our reliance on God more than we ever realized was even possible. And it was because we realized that the only way we would get through it is if we were able to lean on His wisdom to get through them. So with that in mind, we stepped out on our next big, audacious idea. And it was the purchase of a 2,000-acre ranch that would be home to the Mission Lazarus Refuge Children's Home. It's a group of homes for children that is operated unlike any children's home or orphanage that we've ever heard of or seen in the developing world.
So this is just a tiny rabbit trail because I think it's worth it. But remember when I said in college that I insanely wanted to go to Romania and hold babies and work at an orphanage? That is just a long-held dream in my heart that I've had, and I think that God has always known was there. But still, it caught me by surprise that we were actually going to open up some children's homes. And so one day, I let the fear creep in. And so do you remember that day?
I remember this day of
first,
close to emotional meltdown and panic.
No, it was my first mental breakdown on the mission field. And so because I was freaking out thinking what are we doing? And we had already sort of made the commitment. So this wasn't
2,000 acres of land.
This wasn't at the idea stage. This was after we've already started this, and can we undo this? But it was what are we doing? And I'm freaking out, and I'm thinking I can't even parent our own two kids very well. And so who do we think we are? Why are we super qualified to open up a children's home? So somewhere in that hysteria was knowing that we did not get to that place on our own. We didn't maneuver any of those pieces to fall into place. God was doing that. And so, after breathing into a bag for a few minutes, you realize that you're not going to drown. You're in the water, but you're not drowning.
Swimming towards the waves.
The current is actually carrying you forward to this new destination, and not to be afraid of it, because if it's God, it's not going to fail.
That's right.
And that was a really huge moment.
Yeah, and then 2013, you had a big honor.
In 2013, the Honduran government named...
The central government.
The central government of Honduras named Mission Lazarus, named our children's homes as the model for the care of vulnerable and exploited children.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Didn't we have an hour? Oh. All right. We'll spring forward real quick. All right. So let me bring this thing in for a landing. So we get this ranch, and I see huge opportunity to make money, and we try to start farming, and we do all these different things. But we had this model of commitment to this certain wage, and so the farming deal didn't work out for us because of the commitment of this wage that we had. So that model didn't work. But we saw other opportunities. We had this coffee farm, and the coffee farm was unique for farming for us because we could control the market in the U.S. We weren't bound by what the local market could hold. Because unlike jalapenos, they don't have a shelf life. If they're ripe, we got to move them. But with the coffee, we can hold on to it for a while. We can set up our own market in the U.S. And then we got to realize that we could do this vocational training. While there's so many people with college degrees in Honduras, there's just not enough jobs. And so we realized that we could do vocational training and really equip some people, but we needed to have something for them to make. And so with the leather shop, the traditional thing would be to make some sort of equestrian tack that's used locally. But we realized, why don't we make things that we can market in the U.S.? And so that was like 8 years ago. And over the last 8 years, that has taken off. The sales have taken off. If you want to jump to slide 8, maybe that's where we're already at. We've tried a lot of business ventures. Some things worked out better than others. The idea of being able to create a business that creates money for people where they can determine their own destiny, it was impactful for both of us. Allie, coming out of a ministry family, and me from a business point, she realized that many of the services we provided through our programs, we no longer needed to provide them if people had money to pay for them on their own. So our growth has been quite phenomenal, so much so that we had to set up a for-profit endeavor called Lazarus Investments. And yet today we're 100% debt-free. We own our business 100% outright. Mission Lazarus does, not Allie and I. Mission Lazarus does. We have no equity partners. And what are we forecasted for this year?
I believe, if I know the latest numbers, we have made more than $630,000.
We were forecasted for $575,000 in gross revenue, and we will pass $600,000. We don't have our final numbers in yet. But of that, at the end of November, our year-to-date numbers at the end of November, we'd already passed $200,000 in net income that goes straight back into the ministry. For me, that's really exciting. It's really exciting. I want to wind this down because we are past time. When we practiced it, it took us like 35 minutes, and we've gone way over. So real quick, be open, be aware, and don't let where you came from define where God is calling you to. Recently, a friend of mine shared a story with me of when he was asked if money was evil. And Brandon Barnholt replied, "Money isn't evil. God made it. What can make it evil is how you earn it and the way you use it." Thanks so much for your attention.
Thanks, guys.